She thought it was just her toddler wandering in the yard again, but when this mother saw her baby opening the abandoned kennel to comfort the injured German shepherd, she had no idea who was watching from the tree line. Because just moments later, the dog's mother appeared, and what she did next left everyone in the neighborhood absolutely speechless. This is a story about innocence, protection, and something no one could have anticipated. A loyal dog's way of saying, "You saved my child. Now watch what I'll do for yours." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning air carried the scent of pine and fresh-cut grass. As Sarah Mitchell stepped onto her back porch, coffee mug warming her hands against the early autumn chill. The sun had barely risen over the eastern ridge that bordered their rural Pennsylvania property, casting long shadows across the expansive backyard that had sold them on this house 8 months ago. Sarah took a deep breath, savoring the moment of quiet before her energetic 22-month-old son Ethan woke up. These stolen minutes of solitude had become precious since they'd moved from Philadelphia to this 3-acre property in Chester County. Her husband, James, had already left for his shift at the regional hospital where he worked as an emergency physician and wouldn't be back until late evening. "Just you and me today, little man," she murmured, thinking of the day ahead with Ethan. A smile touched her lips as she sipped her coffee, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the branches of the old oak tree that dominated the corner of in their yard. The tranquility shattered when the baby monitor clipped to her sweater crackled with the sound of Ethan's babbling. Earlier than usual, but not unexpected for her curious little boy, who seemed to approach each day with insatiable energy. "Coming, sweetie," she called, though she knew he couldn't hear her. Sarah turned to head inside when something caught her eye. Movement along the tree line that separated their property from the undeveloped woodland behind it. She paused, squinting against the morning light. Probably just a deer, she thought. They'd seen plenty since moving here, often coming right up to the edge of the yard at dawn or dusk. But as she watched, the shape emerged more clearly from the shadows, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a deer, it was a dog. A large, powerful German shepherd moving with purpose but clear caution along the perimeter of their property. Sarah froze, instinctively concerned about any unfamiliar animal near her home. The dog was beautiful but thin, its coat dusty and matted in places. It moved with a slight limp, head low but alert, scanning the yard as if searching for something. The baby monitor erupted with more insistent sounds. Ethan was fully awake now and ready for breakfast. Sarah hesitated, torn between watching the dog and attending to her son. The German shepherd hadn't approached the house, seeming more interested. In the far corner of the property, where an old wooden shed stood. After a moment's deliberation, she hurried inside, making a mental note to call animal control later if the dog returned. 30 minutes later, Ethan sat in his high chair, more of his breakfast on his face and bib than in his stomach. Sarah wiped a smear of applesauce from his cheek, marveling as always at his perfect features, a miniature version of James with the same soulful brown eyes and dimpled smile. "All done, Mama," Ethan declared, pushing away his spoon with the authority only a toddler could muster. "All right, big guy, let's get you cleaned up." Sarah lifted him from the high chair, her mind drifting back to the dog she'd seen. Something about its behavior bothered her, not threatening but purposeful, desperate almost. After cleaning Ethan and changing him into play clothes, Sarah decided some outdoor time would burn off his limitless energy. The autumn day had warmed pleasantly, perfect for exploring the yard under supervision. She settled him in the middle of the fenced patio with his favorite toys while she finished clearing the breakfast dishes, keeping an eye on him through the kitchen window. When she returned 5 minutes later, Ethan was standing at the gate of the patio, pointing excitedly toward the shed. "Doggy, Mama! Doggy!" Sarah's heart skipped. She quickly scanned the yard and saw nothing, but Ethan's insistence continued as he strained against the gate latch that, thankfully, remained beyond his reach. "No doggy right now, sweetie," she assured him, though she felt a prickle of unease. Had the German Shepherd returned? She distracted Ethan with a toy truck, but his attention kept drifting back to the shed area, his little face scrunched in concentration. Later that morning, while Ethan napped, Sarah ventured out to investigate the shed. They rarely used it. It had come with the property and contained only a few garden tools and old lawn furniture from the previous owners. As she approached, she noticed something she'd missed earlier. Beside the shed sat what looked like an old rusted dog kennel, partially obscured by overgrown bushes. Sarah frowned. That wasn't there when they bought the place. Or if it was, it had been hidden. Enough that she hadn't noticed it during their property tours. Drawing closer, she could see it was indeed a large metal kennel, the kind used for transporting large dogs, with a heavy wire door secured by what appeared to be a padlock. "What in the world?" she murmured, pushing aside the branches for a better look. The kennel was weathered, covered in rust and grime, as if it had been there for months. But it was the soft, whimpering sound from inside that made Sarah's blood run cold. Hesitantly, she knelt and peered through the wire mesh door. In the shadowy interior, a young German Shepherd puppy lay curled in a tight ball, its black and tan coat dull with dirt. The puppy couldn't have been more than a few months old, severely undernourished, with ribs clearly visible beneath its skin. "Oh my God," Sarah gasped, instinctively pulling at the door, but the padlock held firm. The puppy raised its head weakly at her voice, dark eyes reflecting fear and exhaustion. A small bowl inside held nothing but rainwater, green with algae. Sarah's mind raced. Who would do this? The property had been vacant for almost a year before they purchased it. Had someone abandoned their dog here? Or worse, deliberately hidden it on an empty property where its cries wouldn't be heard? The answer hit her with sudden clarity. The German Shepherd she'd seen this morning. That had to be the mother, searching for her puppy. Sarah pulled out her phone and called James, but it went straight to voicemail. He would be in surgery. Next, she called Animal Control, explaining the situation with rising urgency. "We'll send someone out, Ma'am, but our closest officer is handling an emergency in Westbrook. It might be a couple of hours." "This puppy might not have a couple of hours," Sarah protested, eyeing the weak form inside the kennel. "I understand your concern, but that's the soonest we can get there. In the meantime, if you can provide some fresh water through the kennel door without putting yourself at risk—" "I'll figure something out," Sarah said firmly, ending the call with a frustrated sigh. The baby monitor, clipped to her belt, signaled that Ethan was stirring from his nap. Sarah hurried back to the house, mind working furiously. She couldn't leave the puppy suffering while waiting for Animal Control. The lock looked old. Maybe she could break it somehow. After retrieving Ethan and settling him with a snack in his portable playpen in the living room, Sarah searched the garage for something to break the padlock. She found a bolt cutter in James's tool chest that looked promising and grabbed a bowl of fresh water and some leftover chicken from last night's dinner. "We'll be right back, sweetie," she told Ethan, who was contentedly stacking blocks. "Mama needs to help the doggy." But as she turned to leave, the living room suddenly felt eerily quiet. Sarah looked back and froze. The playpen was empty. The block tower stood incomplete, but Ethan was gone. "Ethan!" Panic surged through her as she rushed to check the kitchen, bathroom, and bedrooms. "Ethan!" The front door remained locked, but the back door leading to the patio stood ajar, the safety latch she always kept engaged now dangling open. With rising horror, Sarah realized Ethan must have figured out how to reach and open it. She burst, onto the patio, scanning the yard desperately. "Ethan!" Her voice echoed across the property as she ran, the bolt cutters and food forgotten. Had he wandered into the woods, fallen into the decorative pond at the edge of the yard? Then she saw him, a small figure in bright blue overalls, crouched beside the old kennel, his tiny hands reaching through the wire door. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "Ethan, no!" she called, running toward him. But as she drew closer, the scene before her made her slow her pace in astonishment. Ethan wasn't in danger. He was sitting calmly beside the kennel, his small fingers poking what looked like pieces of his snack crackers through the wire mesh. Inside, the German Shepherd puppy had crawled forward, weakly licking crumbs from Ethan's fingertips. More incredibly, the kennel door hung open, the rusted padlock lying broken on the ground beside it. "How did you—" Sarah whispered, approaching cautiously. "Doggy hungry, Mama," Ethan explained simply, as if breaking into a locked kennel was the most natural thing in the world for a toddler. He reached in again, gently patting the puppy's head. "Nice doggy." Sarah knelt beside her son, examining the broken lock. It hadn't been cut, but appeared to have simply fallen apart, the rusted metal giving way. Had Ethan pulled on it? Or had it been ready to break all along? The puppy whimpered softly, still too weak to emerge from its prison despite the open door. Sarah reached for her phone to call animal control again, to tell them the situation had changed. That's when she felt it. A prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Slowly, she turned her head toward the tree line. There, perfectly still and focused entirely on the scene before her, stood the adult German Shepherd, its amber eyes locked not on the puppy, but on Ethan. Sarah's maternal instincts flared. She moved to pull Ethan away, but something in the dog's posture made her hesitate. The German Shepherd wasn't displaying aggression, no raised hackles, no bared teeth. Instead, it stood with an almost regal bearing, watching as the toddler continued to feed tiny morsels to its starving puppy. "Mama! Look!" Ethan whispered with delight, pointing toward the trees. "Big doggy!" The mother dog took a single step. Forward, then another, each movement deliberate and measured. Sarah tensed, ready to grab Ethan and run if necessary. But the German Shepherd's eyes held something that made Sarah pause. Intelligence, awareness, and something that looked remarkably like restraint. It was watching its puppy being fed by a human child, and instead of attacking out of fear or protection, it was waiting, observing, assessing. And what happened next would change everything Sarah thought she knew about the bonds between species and the depth of understanding that can exist without a single word being spoken. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as the mother German Shepherd continued her deliberate approach. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Ethan and retreat to the safety of the house, but something held her in place, something in the dog's eyes that conveyed intelligence rather than threat. "Stay very still, Ethan," Sarah whispered, her hand resting lightly on her son's small shoulder. To her relief, Ethan remained calm, seemingly oblivious to any potential danger as he continued gently stroking the puppy's head through the kennel wire. The mother dog paused about 15 feet away, her amber eyes moving between Sarah, Ethan, and the weakened puppy. She was magnificent, despite her evident hardship. Her coat, though dusty and matted in places, still showed the classic black and tan markings of a purebred German Shepherd. Her ears stood alert, and her powerful frame, though leaner than it should have been, spoke of natural strength and dignity. Sarah noticed something else now, a faded red collar, weathered and frayed, still encircling the dog's neck. This wasn't a wild animal or a stray. This was someone's pet, somehow separated from her home. The German Shepherd lowered her head slightly and took another step forward. Sarah tensed, but then she realized the dog wasn't approaching aggressively. Her body language was cautious, even submissive. Another step, then another, each movement measured and deliberate. "Mama, she's coming," Ethan whispered with childish delight, still feeding tiny bits of cracker to the puppy. "I see her, sweetie. Just stay quiet," Sarah replied, barely breathing. As the mother dog closed the distance, when she was about 6 feet away, the German Shepherd stopped and did something that left Sarah speechless. She lowered herself to the ground, belly against the grass, head between her front paws, in the universal canine posture of submission. Her eyes, however, remained fixed on Ethan and the puppy, alert and intelligent. Sarah had grown up with dogs. She knew enough about canine behavior to recognize this wasn't normal. Wild dogs, stray dogs, even most domesticated dogs would never approach a stranger near their vulnerable offspring this way. They would bark, growl, display dominance or aggression, anything to protect their young. But this mother was deliberately showing them she meant no harm. "She wants us to help," Sarah murmured, the realization dawning slowly. As if in response, the German Shepherd gave a soft whine and inched forward on her belly until she was just a few feet from Ethan. The toddler turned to look at her, his brown eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "Nice doggy," Ethan said, reaching his hand toward the mother dog. "Ethan, wait," Sarah began, but before she could stop him, the German Shepherd had stretched her neck forward and gently, so gently, licked Ethan's fingers. It was a gesture of such surprising tenderness that Sarah felt her fear dissolving into amazement. The dog wasn't just tolerating their presence near her puppy, she was thanking them. Cautiously, Sarah extended her own hand, palm down, in the non-threatening manner she'd been taught since childhood. The German Shepherd sniffed her fingers, then pressed her muzzle briefly against Sarah's palm, a gesture of trust that brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. "You've been trying to get to your baby, haven't you?" Sarah said softly. "How long have you been out here trying to open that kennel?" The dog's gaze shifted to the puppy, who had managed to crawl to the edge of the kennel door, but still lacked the strength to emerge. With another soft whine, the mother dog looked back at Sarah, then at the puppy, then back at Sarah again. The communication as clear as if she'd spoken aloud. "Help him." Sarah moved slowly to avoid startling either dog and knelt beside the kennel. The puppy couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 months old, but malnutrition and dehydration had left him severely undersized. His ribs protruded painfully beneath his dull coat, and his eyes, though alert, showed the glazed look of an animal on the edge of its endurance. "You poor thing," Sarah murmured, gently gathering the limp puppy into her arms. He weighed far, less than he should have, his body burning with fever despite the cool morning air. The mother dog watched intently, but made no move to interfere, as Sarah examined her offspring. "He needs water, food, and probably antibiotics," Sarah said, half to herself and half to the mother dog, who had risen to her feet and now stood attentively beside them. "We need to get him to a vet." Sarah looked at the mother dog, struck by a sudden realization. "And you're coming too. I'm not separating you again." Decision made, Sarah turned to Ethan. "Sweetie, we need to help the doggies. Can you walk back to the house with Mama?" Ethan nodded solemnly, his usual exuberance tempered by the gravity he somehow sensed in the situation. Sarah carefully cradled the puppy against her chest and began walking slowly toward the house, Ethan's small hand clutched in hers. She glanced back, expecting the mother dog to keep her distance. Instead, the German Shepherd fell into step beside them, matching their pace exactly, her body positioned protectively on Ethan's side, not between the humans and her puppy as instinct might dictate, but as an escort, a guardian for the child. The significance of this wasn't lost on Sarah. The dog had made a choice that defied natural instinct. Rather than snatching her puppy and retreating to the woods, she had decided to trust them. More incredibly, she seemed to be offering protection in return. When they reached the patio, Sarah hesitated. She couldn't leave the mother dog outside. While they tended to the puppy, that would be cruel given what they'd just witnessed. But bringing an unknown, possibly traumatized animal into the house with her toddler presented its own risks. The German Shepherd sat at the threshold, making no attempt to enter uninvited, her intelligent eyes fixed on Sarah's face as if understanding her dilemma. "You wait here, just for a minute," Sarah told the dog, surprised at how natural it felt to address her as if she could understand. "I'm going to call our vet and get some water for both of you." Inside, she placed the puppy gently on a soft blanket in the living room and quickly filled a bowl with clean water, which she set down. On the patio, the mother dog drank thirstily but neatly, further evidence of her training and domestication. Meanwhile, Sarah used a dropper from Ethan's medicine cabinet to give the puppy small amounts of water, careful not to overwhelm his weakened system. A call to their local veterinarian, Dr. Abernathy, confirmed what Sarah suspected. The puppy needed immediate medical attention. "I can squeeze you in at 11, the receptionist told her. "Dr. Abernathy says to keep giving small amounts of water, but no food yet until he's examined." "There's something else," Sarah added. "The puppy's mother is here too. She's wearing a collar but no tags, and she's clearly been on her own for a while." "Bring her in as well," the receptionist advised. "The doctor will want to check both of them, and we can scan for a microchip." After ending the call, Sarah returned to the patio, surprised to find Ethan sitting beside the German Shepherd, his small hand resting on her shoulder as he babbled happily to her. The dog sat perfectly still, her posture alert but relaxed, occasionally turning to gently lick Ethan's hand. "Mama, she likes me," Ethan announced proudly. "I can see that," Sarah replied, amazed at the instant bond that had formed between her son and this dog, who by all logic should have been wary of humans after. Whatever ordeal she had endured, the next challenge was transportation. Sarah's SUV was equipped with Ethan's car seat, but fitting an injured puppy and a full-grown German Shepherd presented a logistical puzzle. She ultimately decided to create a makeshift bed for the puppy using a laundry basket lined with towels, which could be secured with a seatbelt in the back seat. For the mother dog, she found an old leash in the garage, approaching her cautiously with it. "We need to go for a ride to help your baby," Sarah explained, showing the leash. "Is this okay?" To her continued astonishment, the German Shepherd lowered her head, allowing Sarah to clip the leash to her collar without resistance. She followed them to the vehicle, and after watching Ethan being secured in his car seat, jumped gracefully into the back when Sarah opened the hatch, settling herself with the composed dignity that seemed to be her hallmark. The 20-minute drive to Woodland Veterinary Clinic passed without incident, the mother dog lying quietly in the back, occasionally raising her head to check on her puppy in the basket and on Ethan in his car seat, as if ensuring both young ones were safe. Dr. Abernathy, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who had been their vet since they moved to the area, met them at the entrance, her eyebrows rising at the sight of the majestic German Shepherd walking calmly beside Sarah, who carried the puppy in the basket. "Well now, this is quite a situation," she remarked, guiding them to an examination room. "Let's have a look at our patients." The puppy, whom Sarah had started mentally calling Max, was quickly examined, diagnosed with severe dehydration, malnutrition, and a respiratory infection, but Dr. Abernathy was cautiously optimistic. "He's young, and despite everything, his vital signs are better than I would have expected. With proper care, I think he'll recover." While a veterinary technician started Max on IV fluids and antibiotics, Dr. Abernathy turned her attention to the mother dog, who submitted to the examination with stoic patience. "She's severely undernourished, but otherwise in remarkably good health considering what she's been through," the vet concluded. No signs of disease, no serious injuries beyond some minor cuts and abrasions. She's probably been surviving on whatever she could hunt or scavenge while trying to reach her puppy. The scanner revealed a microchip, and the clinic staff quickly made some calls. The resulting information left everyone in the room stunned into silence. The German Shepherd's name was Athena. She'd been reported missing nearly 6 months ago from a home over 30 miles away. According to the records, she'd given birth to a litter of 7 puppies shortly before her disappearance. The puppies had been found in the owner's garage, but Athena herself had vanished without a trace, until one day the puppies had started disappearing one by one. The police suspected the owner was selling them illegally, the receptionist explained after speaking with animal control. But they could never prove it. The remaining puppies were removed from the home, and the owner was charged with animal neglect, but they never found the missing ones. Sarah looked at Athena with newfound admiration. She wasn't running away, she realized aloud. She was trying to save them. She was finding them and moving them somewhere safe. Dr. Abernathy nodded slowly. German Shepherds are among the most intelligent breeds. Their problem-solving abilities and devotion to family, which for a mother dog would include her puppies, can lead to behaviors that seem almost human in their complexity. But how did she track them over such distances? Sarah wondered. And how did she know where to look? A dog's sense of smell is approximately 10,000 to 100,000 times more sensitive than ours, Dr. Abernathy explained, combined with their ability to recognize the unique scent of their offspring. It's extraordinary, but not impossible. Sarah glanced down at Ethan, who had fallen asleep in her lap after the excitement of the morning, and then at Athena, who had positioned herself protectively beside the examination table where Max was receiving treatment. "What happens to them now?" she asked quietly. The question hung in the air, laden with implications. Athena's original owner was clearly unfit to reclaim her. The puppy, once recovered, would need a permanent home. And Sarah, who had only wanted to investigate a strange sound in her backyard, now found herself irrevocably connected to this remarkable story of maternal devotion and courage. But even as she contemplated the complications, Sarah knew in her heart that something profound had occurred that morning, something that transcended the usual boundaries between species. Athena had made a choice to trust humans again, specifically Sarah and her son, when she had every reason to fear them. And in that choice lay the beginning of an extraordinary bond that would continue to reveal itself in ways no one could have predicted. The drive home from the veterinary clinic was subdued, weighted with the significance of everything Sarah had learned. Dr. Abernathy had recommended keeping Max at the clinic overnight for continued IV fluids and monitoring, but had surprised Sarah by suggesting that Athena could go home with them if Sarah felt comfortable with the arrangement. "She's bonded with you and your son," the veterinarian had explained. "In her current state, separating her from the only people she trusts might cause unnecessary stress. And frankly, I've rarely seen a dog display such clear protective instincts toward a child who isn't part of her family unit." So now Athena sat in the back of the SUV, her intelligent eyes meeting Sarah's in the rearview mirror occasionally, as if they were having a silent conversation about what would happen next. Ethan had fallen asleep in his car seat, the excitement of the morning finally catching up with him. Sarah's thoughts whirled as she drove the familiar country roads back to their home. James would be finishing his shift at the hospital soon. How would she explain their new house guest? They had discussed getting a dog eventually, but were waiting until Ethan was older. And while James loved animals, bringing home a full-grown German Shepherd with a complicated past wasn't exactly what they had planned. Yet every time Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Athena's dignified face, she felt a certainty that transcended logical concerns. This wasn't just any dog. This was a mother who had demonstrated extraordinary intelligence, devotion, and trust. There was something special here, something that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. As they pulled into the driveway, Sarah's phone rang. It was James. "Hey, how are my two favorite people?" he asked, his voice warm despite the exhaustion that 12 hours in the ER inevitably produced. "We're good," Sarah replied, trying to sound casual. "How was your shift?" The usual controlled chaos. "Listen, I'm grabbing dinner with Dr. Patel to discuss that new trauma protocol, but I should be home by 8. Anything exciting happened today?" Sarah looked at Athena, who was watching her intently from the back seat. "You could say that," she answered carefully. "Actually, we have a lot to talk about when you get home." A pause on the other end. "Everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine, just unexpected. I'll explain everything tonight." After ending the call, Sarah helped a sleepy Ethan from his car seat and led both him and Athena into the house. The German Shepherd entered cautiously, her nails clicking softly on the hardwood floors as she took in the new environment with alert senses. Sarah watched as Athena conducted a methodical inspection of the living room, kitchen, and hallway, not with the random curiosity of most dogs, but with what appeared to be a deliberate assessment of the space. "Checking for safety hazards?" Sarah asked, half joking. Athena looked at her as if considering the question, then continued her patrol, pausing particularly at the back door, the large bay windows, and finally, Ethan's playpen, where the toddler was now contentedly stacking blocks. Sarah prepared an early dinner for Ethan, followed by his bath time routine. Through it all, Athena remained a quiet, attentive presence, never intrusive but always nearby, her behavior so unlike what Sarah expected from a dog who had been living wild for months. There was no destructive exploration, no jumping on furniture, no begging for food, though Sarah had provided a bowl of the premium dog food Dr. Abernathy had given them. Instead, Athena seemed to be deliberately demonstrating her manners, her worthiness to be in their home. When Sarah carried a sleepy Ethan upstairs for his evening nap, Athena followed at a respectful distance, sitting outside the nursery door while Sarah sang her son's favorite lullaby and tucked him in. "You can come in," Sarah whispered, touched by the dog's sensitivity. Athena entered silently, approaching the crib with gentle steps. She raised herself slightly to peer at the sleeping toddler, her tail wagging softly. Then, to Sarah's amazement, she settled on the floor beside the crib, her body positioned between the door and Ethan, her alert eyes fixed on the hallway beyond. The message was unmistakable. "I'm watching over him." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching down to gently stroke Athena's head. The German Shepherd leaned slightly into her touch, not demanding more, simply acknowledging the connection between them. Leaving the nursery door ajar, Sarah went downstairs to prepare for James's return. The gravity of what she was about to propose settled on her shoulders. They would be taking on not just one, but eventually 2 dogs, one of which had suffered trauma and separation that might manifest in unpredictable ways down the road. It would mean additional expenses, logistical challenges, and a significant commitment of time and energy. Yet as she moved around the kitchen, she kept glancing at the stairs, knowing Athena remained vigilant beside Ethan's crib. The dog had demonstrated a level of intelligence, loyalty, and gentle protectiveness that transcended normal expectations. Sarah couldn't help feeling that turning Athena away would be refusing something extraordinary that had entered their lives unexpectedly, but perhaps not accidentally. At 7:30, the sound of James's car in the driveway sent a flutter of nervous anticipation through Sarah's stomach. She heard his key in the lock, then his familiar footsteps in the entryway. "Sarah?" he called softly, mindful of Ethan's possible sleeping state. "In the kitchen," she answered, wiping suddenly damp palms on her jeans. James appeared in the doorway, his tall frame slightly stooped with fatigue, his dark hair disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit when he was stressed or tired. His eyes, however, lit up at the sight of her, as they always did, no matter how exhausting his day had been. "There's my girl," he smiled, crossing the room to kiss her. "Now what's this mysterious thing we need to talk about?" Before Sarah could answer, a soft sound from the stairs made them both turn. Athena stood on the landing, her powerful body alert but not tense, her intelligent eyes fixed on James, assessing, evaluating this new presence in her adopted territory. James froze, his arm still around Sarah's waist. "That's a German Shepherd," he said slowly, his medical training kicking in as he remained perfectly still, making no sudden movements. "Her name is Athena," Sarah replied quietly. "And you won't believe the story I'm about to tell you." Over the next hour, as they sat at the kitchen table with cups of coffee growing cold between them, Sarah recounted everything, finding the kennel, Ethan's inexplicable opening of the lock, Athena's appearance and remarkable behavior, and finally, the veterinarian's revelations about her past. James listened without interruption, his expression shifting from concern to amazement to something softer and more contemplative. When Sarah finally fell silent, he sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "So, let me get this straight," he said carefully. "Our son somehow freed a puppy from a locked kennel. The mother dog, instead of being aggressive, showed gratitude and is now upstairs guarding Ethan's room, and you want to adopt both of them." Put so boldly, it sounded either insane or miraculous, depending on one's perspective. Sarah nodded, holding her breath. To her surprise, James's face broke into a slow smile. "You know, when I was growing up, we had a German Shepherd named Rex. Best dog I've ever known. Intelligent, loyal, protective. My parents always said he raised me as much as they did." He glanced toward the stairs, where Athena had returned to her self-appointed post. "But this is something else entirely." "I know it's a lot to take on," Sarah began, but James held up a hand. "Before you continue trying to convince me, I should tell you something." He reached for his phone, scrolled through it, and handed it to her. "I received this email during my dinner with Dr. Patel. It's why I didn't question you further when you said we needed to talk." Sarah looked down at the screen, confused. It was an email from their local police department, a community alert about a man arrested earlier that day for animal cruelty and suspected dogfighting operations. Attached was a security camera image showing a figure placing what appeared to be a dog kennel in a wooded area not far from their property. "They found 6 more kennels hidden throughout the county," James explained quietly, "all containing puppies in various states of neglect. The police believe he was using them as bait dogs for training fighting dogs, keeping them separated and hidden to avoid detection." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears as the full implication hit her. "Athena wasn't just trying to find her puppies," she whispered. "She was racing against time to save them from something even worse than neglect." James nodded, his expression grave. "According to the report, they were able to rescue all the puppies they found alive, but they suspect there are more they haven't located yet." He glanced toward the stairs again. Her maternal instinct led her to track her puppies across miles, breaking into locked kennels somehow to free them. That's not just intelligence, that's determination beyond anything I've ever heard of in an animal. A soft whine from the baby monitor indicated that Ethan was stirring. Before either of them could move, they heard the subtle sound of movement upstairs, followed by Ethan's delighted giggle and murmur of "doggy." They rushed upstairs to find Athena gently nuzzling Ethan through the crib slats, her tail wagging as the toddler patted her nose with chubby fingers. The scene was so natural, so filled with mutual affection, that any remaining doubts Sarah might have harbored melted away. James stood beside her in the doorway, his expression soft with wonder. "I think," he said quietly, "the decision has already been made for us." That night, after Ethan had been settled back to sleep and they had prepared the guest room as a temporary space for Athena, though Sarah suspected the dog would remain near Ethan regardless, they sat on the back porch, watching the stars emerge. In the clear autumn sky, "I called Dr. Abernathy," James said. "Max is doing better. His fever's down, and he's responding well to the fluids and antibiotics. She thinks he can come home the day after tomorrow." Sarah nodded, relief flooding through her. "Do you think Athena somehow knew? That we would help, I mean, that Ethan would find that kennel and open it?" James considered this, his scientific mind wrestling with the implications. "I don't know if she knew in the way we understand knowing," he said finally. "But animals have instincts and perceptions we've barely begun to understand. German shepherds in particular have been bred for centuries to work with humans, to read our intentions and emotions." He glanced through the window to where Athena lay on the living room floor, her eyes half closed but still alert to any sound from upstairs. "What I do know is that she chose to trust you and Ethan when she had every reason not to trust humans at all. And that choice, whether it was based on instinct, intelligence, or something we don't have a name for, has changed the course of multiple lives." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his arm around her. "Including ours," she murmured. As they sat in companionable silence, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Dr. Abernathy, a photo of Max, looking markedly better than he had that morning, his eyes brighter and more alert as he lay on his bedding at the clinic. "I've been thinking," James said, looking at the picture. "Max isn't quite right for him." "Oh," Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You have a better suggestion?" James smiled, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "How about Miracle? It seems fitting, given everything that had to align for him to be found and saved. Athena tracking him across miles, the kennel being on our property, Ethan somehow opening that lock." He shrugged. "Some things defy simple explanation." Sarah considered this, testing the name in her mind. "Athena and Miracle," she said softly. "I like that." Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Sarah paused at Ethan's door for her customary final check. Athena lay on the floor beside the crib, her position unchanged, her vigilance unwavering. When she saw Sarah, her tail thumped gently against the carpet, acknowledgement without distraction from her self-appointed duty. "Good night, guardian," Sarah whispered, her heart full with the knowledge that something extraordinary had entered their lives. A reminder that courage, devotion, and trust could manifest in the most unexpected forms and create connections that transcended the boundaries between species. In the quiet house, as the Mitchell family slept under Athena's watchful protection, the first chapter of their remarkable story came to a close. But as with all true stories of connection and transformation, it was not an ending, but a beginning. The foundation of something that would continue to unfold in ways none of them could yet imagine. And somewhere in the realm between animal instinct and something more profound, Athena settled deeper into her position beside Ethan's crib, her mission transformed but not ended, her devotion finding a new expression in this human family that had shown her what she had never stopped believing must exist: kindness, compassion, and the recognition of her own fierce and determined love. The next morning dawned with golden light filtering through the autumn leaves, bathing the Mitchell home in a warm glow. Sarah woke early, momentarily disoriented by the absence of James beside her, until she remembered he had taken an early shift. At the hospital, as consciousness fully returned, the events of the previous day came flooding back: the kennel, the puppy, and most significantly, Athena. She rose quickly, anxious to check on their new household member. The guest room they had prepared for Athena was empty, the blankets they had arranged untouched. Sarah wasn't surprised. She padded quietly to Ethan's room and paused in the doorway, her heart swelling at the sight before her. Ethan was awake, sitting up in his crib and babbling happily as he dropped his stuffed animals one by one over the rail. Below, Athena sat, patiently, carefully collecting each toy in her mouth and gently placing it back into the crib, participating in a game that clearly delighted them both. The German Shepherd moved with deliberate gentleness, her powerful jaws holding the plush toys with such care that not even a thread was damaged. "Good morning, you two," Sarah said softly. Athena turned, her amber eyes bright with intelligence, her tail sweeping the floor in greeting. Ethan squealed with delight. "Mama, Tina play!" Sarah blinked at her son's pronunciation. "Athena," she corrected gently. "Her name is Athena." "Tina," Ethan insisted, pointing at the dog with absolute certainty. Athena's ears perked forward at the name, and she looked between mother and child as if following the conversation. Then, with deliberate clarity, she picked up the blue elephant Ethan had just dropped and returned it to the crib. "I think she likes her nickname," Sarah smiled, approaching to lift Ethan from his crib, "and it seems she's been taking good care of you." The morning routine flowed with surprising ease, as if Athena had always been part of their household. She followed them downstairs, watched attentively as Sarah prepared breakfast, and settled beside Ethan's high chair, not begging but maintaining her self-appointed position as guardian. When Sarah offered her the premium food Dr. Abernathy had provided, Athena ate with polite restraint, her manners further evidence of her previous training. "We're going to visit your puppy today," Sarah told her as she cleaned up the breakfast dishes. "Dr. Abernathy says he's doing much better." At the mention of her offspring, Athena's ears perked up, her gaze intensifying. Sarah was continuously amazed by the dog's apparent comprehension of human speech, not just tones or specific commands, but complex sentences and contexts. After dressing Ethan for the day, Sarah faced her next challenge, leaving Athena alone while they visited the veterinary clinic. James had suggested bringing her along, but Sarah worried it might be too stressful for both dogs, especially with Miracle still in a weakened state. Better to let him continue recovering in the controlled environment of the clinic for one more day. "We won't be gone long," Sarah explained to Athena, feeling only slightly foolish for speaking to her as she would to another adult. "We're just going to check on your puppy and make sure everything is ready for him to come home tomorrow." Athena listened with that same intense focus, then did something that left Sarah momentarily speechless. She walked to the front window, placed her paws on the sill to look outside, then returned to Sarah and sat, looking expectantly at Ethan's jacket hanging by the door. The message was unmistakable. "I'm coming with you." Sarah hesitated, reconsidering her plan. "All right," she said finally, "but you'll need to wait in the car while we check on him first. We'll see if Dr. Abernathy thinks it's a good idea for you to come in." The trip to the veterinary clinic unfolded with the same surprising harmony that had characterized the morning. Athena sat calmly in the back seat, occasionally looking out the window with alert interest, but mostly keeping her attention on Ethan, who babbled happily in his car seat, periodically calling "Tina" and giggling when she turned toward him. At the clinic, Sarah was greeted by Jenny, one of the veterinary technicians who had assisted with Miracle's treatment the day before. "Well, look who's back," Jenny smiled, then noticed Athena waiting patiently in the car. "You brought Mama too. How's she adjusting?" "Remarkably well," Sarah replied, adjusting Ethan on her hip. "She's incredibly gentle with Ethan, and she seems to understand everything we say." Jenny nodded knowingly. German shepherds are scary smart. My brother trains them for service work, and he swears they understand English better than some people he knows." She glanced at the car again. "Dr. Abernathy actually wanted to see her today too. We could bring her in through the side entrance to avoid the waiting room if you're comfortable with that." 10 minutes later, they were gathered in a private examination room. Ethan contentedly playing with toys from the diaper bag, Athena sitting at attention beside Sarah, and Dr. Abernathy entering with Miracle, cradled carefully in her arms. The change in the puppy from yesterday was striking. Though still thin, his eyes were bright and alert, his small tail wagging weakly at the sight of them. When he spotted Athena, he let out a high-pitched whine of recognition, straining toward her with surprising energy. Dr. Abernathy carefully placed him on the examination table, keeping a supportive hand on his back. "He's made remarkable progress," she explained. "The IV fluids address the dehydration, and the antibiotics are tackling the infection. He's even eaten a small amount this morning." Athena rose slightly on her hind legs, gently placing her front paws on the edge of the table to better see her puppy. The reunion between mother and offspring was touching in its restraint. No frantic movements that might harm the recovering puppy, just gentle nuzzling and soft whines of communication that transcended human understanding. "His blood work came back much better than we expected," Dr. Abernathy continued, watching the interaction closely. "No signs of organ damage, despite the severe dehydration and malnutrition. Young animals can be incredibly resilient with proper care." Sarah nodded, remembering James's suggested name. "We're thinking of calling him Miracle," she said. "It seems appropriate, given everything." "Very fitting," the veterinarian agreed with a warm smile. "And speaking of miracles, I've been consulting with colleagues about Athena's remarkable behavior. German shepherds are known for their intelligence and problem-solving abilities, but what she's demonstrated goes beyond typical canine cognition." She gestured toward Athena, who was now carefully grooming her puppy with gentle licks, mindful of the IV catheter still in his front leg. The distance she traveled, her ability to locate multiple hidden kennels, the methods she must have used to open them. "It's extraordinary. And now this immediate bond with your son." She shook her head in wonder. "In my 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen anything quite like it." As if aware she was being discussed, Athena looked up, her amber eyes meeting Sarah's with that same penetrating intelligence. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned to Ethan, who had abandoned his toys and was watching the dogs with fascination. With deliberate movements, she returned to the toddler's side and sat, as if demonstrating her commitment to both her puppy and her adopted human charge. "That's another thing," Dr. Abernathy said quietly, observing this interaction. "She seems to understand the concept of divided responsibility, that she can care for her puppy while also protecting your son. That level of priority assessment and decision-making is, well, it challenges what we understand about canine cognition." The examination continued with Dr. Abernathy, checking Miracle's vital signs and changing his bandages. Throughout, Athena remained attentive but calm, her behavior so exemplary that the veterinarian commented on it several times. "Most protective mothers wouldn't allow this level of handling of their vulnerable offspring," she noted. "Her trust in us is as remarkable as her intelligence." As they prepared to leave, with assurances that Miracle could come home the following day, Dr. Abernathy pulled Sarah aside, while a technician entertained Ethan, and Athena waited patiently by the door. "I received a call from Detective Ramirez this morning," she said in a lowered voice. "They've identified the man arrested in connection with the dogfighting operation. His name is Victor Sloan. He has previous convictions for animal cruelty in 2 other states." Sarah felt a chill run through her. "Did they find more puppies?" 3 more so far, all in similar conditions to Miracle. They're being treated at various clinics in the county. The veterinarian hesitated. There's something else. According to the evidence they've gathered, Sloane was particularly interested in Athena's litter because of their bloodlines. Apparently, she comes from championship stock. Her grandfather was a nationally ranked Schutzhund competitor. Schutzhund? It's a dog sport that tests tracking, obedience, and protection skills. It was originally developed to assess German Shepherds. For breeding purposes, focusing on intelligence, trainability, courage, and protective instincts. She glanced at Athena. It would explain a lot about her exceptional abilities. Those traits would have been specifically selected for over generations. As they drove home, Sarah's mind whirled with everything she had learned. The genetic heritage that made Athena extraordinary had also made her and her puppies targets for exploitation. Yet despite everything she had endured, her capacity for trust remained intact. Not indiscriminate trust, but carefully assessed and deliberately bestowed. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Athena's alert gaze. "Tomorrow we bring your baby home," she said softly, "and then we all start figuring out our new normal." Back at the house, Sarah was surprised to find James's car in the driveway. He emerged from the front door as they pulled up, his face lighting with a smile as he approached. "Daddy!" Ethan squealed as Sarah unbuckled him from his car seat. "Hey, buddy!" James swung his son into his arms, then leaned to kiss Sarah. "How did it go at the vet?" "Miracle is doing really well," Sarah replied, using the new name naturally now. "He's coming home tomorrow." "But what are you doing here? I thought you had a full shift today." James grinned mysteriously. "I swapped with Dr. Wilson so I could get some things ready." He looked at Athena, who had exited the car and was standing attentively beside them. "Come see." He led them to the backyard, where Sarah stopped in surprise. The old shed had been cleared away, and in its place stood a large, sturdy doghouse with a covered porch area, positioned to catch both morning sun and afternoon shade. Beside it, a smaller matching structure waited, sized perfectly for a growing puppy. "James, when did you do all this?" "I started last night after you went to bed, and I had some help from Mike next door this morning." He set Ethan down carefully. "There's more inside." In the house, Sarah found the living room rearranged to accommodate 2 plush dog beds positioned near the fireplace. A collection of high-quality dog supplies, food and water bowls, leashes, toys, grooming tools, was arranged neatly on the coffee table. But most surprising was the custom baby gate installed at the bottom of the stairs, designed with a small door that could be operated by an adult, or, Sarah realized with amazement, by a dog as intelligent as Athena. "I figured she might want to check on Ethan during the night without having to wait for one of us to open the regular gates," James explained, demonstrating how the mechanism worked. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. "You did all this overnight?" James shrugged, but his expression was soft with understanding. "When something this extraordinary comes into your life, you don't hesitate. You make room for it." Athena approached the gate, studying the mechanism with evident interest. James knelt beside her, demonstrating once more how the latch worked. To their astonishment, she immediately raised her paw and pressed it precisely where needed, unlatching the small door. "Unbelievable," James whispered, exchanging an amazed glance with Sarah. That evening, after Ethan was tucked into bed under Athena's watchful eye, Sarah and James sat together on the back porch, discussing everything Dr. Abernathy had shared about Athena's background and genetic heritage. "It explains her abilities," James agreed, "but not her choices." Genetics might give her the capacity for problem-solving and protective instincts, but the decision to trust you and Ethan after everything she's been through, that's something more. Sarah nodded, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. It's like she recognized something in us, or maybe specifically in Ethan, something that told her we were safe when her every experience would have taught her the opposite. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, contemplating the remarkable events that had led to this moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integrating Miracle into their household, continuing to build trust with Athena, establishing routines that worked for their expanded family. But underneath those practical considerations ran a current of wonder at the extraordinary connection that had formed so unexpectedly. "I keep thinking about that moment when Ethan somehow opened the kennel," Sarah said softly. "Dr. Abernathy says it must have been already damaged, ready to fall apart, but the timing of it all, Athena watching from the trees, Ethan finding the kennel on that specific morning." James squeezed her hand gently. "Some things defy simple explanation," he reminded her. "Sometimes you just have to accept the miracle for what it is." Inside the house, Athena lay beside Ethan's crib, her acute senses monitoring every sound, every subtle shift in the environment. Tomorrow, her puppy would join them, completing the circle of protection and trust that had begun with a desperate search and a child's innocent compassion. In the quiet darkness, she closed her eyes, not to sleep but to rest, secure in the knowledge that for the first time in many months, both sides of her heart, her puppy and her newfound human family, would soon be united under one roof. And in that unity, something new would continue to unfold. A bond formed through adversity, strengthened by trust, and illuminated by the extraordinary capacity for connection that transcends the boundaries between species. The morning of Miracle's homecoming dawned with a crystalline brightness that seemed fitting for the occasion. Sarah woke to find James already downstairs, preparing a special breakfast. The sounds of his quiet movements in the kitchen mingled with Ethan's cheerful babbling through the baby monitor, and the occasional soft whine from Athena, who had spent the night alternating between her position by Ethan's crib and short patrols of the house perimeter. Sarah watched from the bedroom doorway as Athena used her paw to unlatch the custom gate James had installed, demonstrating once again her remarkable adaptability and intelligence. The German Shepherd paused at the top of the stairs, her keen senses detecting Sarah's presence. She turned, meeting Sarah's gaze with that now familiar look of awareness that transcended typical animal cognition. "Today's the big day," Sarah said softly. "Ready to have your puppy home?" Athena's tail swept once, a measured acknowledgement rather than the frantic wagging of most excited dogs. Even in her expressions of emotion, she displayed a dignity and restraint that set her apart. Downstairs, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of coffee, pancakes, and something else, a savory scent coming from a pot simmering on the back burner. "What's that?" Sarah asked, kissing James's cheek as he flipped a perfectly golden pancake. "Bone broth," he replied with a slightly self-conscious smile. "I called Dr. Abernathy last night for recommendations on what might help Miracle regain his strength. She suggested starting with small amounts of this alongside his regular food." He gestured toward a collection of supplies on the counter: medications, special puppy formula, vitamin supplements, and feeding syringes. "I picked everything up on my way home last night." Sarah felt a rush of affection for her husband. His medical training made him naturally thorough, but this level of preparation spoke of emotional investment, not just practical concern. "You're really all in on this, aren't you?" she said, wrapping her arms around his waist. James set down his spatula and turned to face her. "You know, When you called me yesterday about finding a dog in a kennel, I thought we were looking at a temporary situation. Maybe fostering until a permanent home could be found." He glanced at Athena, who had settled in her designated spot, near Ethan's high chair, already anticipating the toddler's breakfast routine, but seeing her with Ethan, understanding what she's been through and what she did to save her puppies. This isn't temporary, this is family. The appointment to bring Miracle home was scheduled for 11 o'clock. After breakfast, they prepared the house for the new arrival, setting up the special recovery area James had created in the corner of the living room, a comfortable bed surrounded by baby gates that would allow Miracle to see everyone while still having a protected space to rest and heal. When it was time to leave, a minor battle of wills ensued. James had suggested leaving Athena at home for this trip, concerned that the excitement of having both dogs in the car might be too much for Miracle in his weakened state. Athena, however, had other ideas. She positioned herself firmly by the front door, her body language making it abundantly clear that she had no intention of being left behind. "I think we're outvoted," Sarah laughed as Athena maintained her ground, amber eyes fixed on them with calm determination. "Apparently so," James conceded with a rueful smile. "I'm starting to understand what they mean about German shepherds, being stubborn." "Not stubborn," Sarah corrected, watching as Athena finally moved toward the car once she realized they had yielded. "Determined. There's a difference." The drive to the veterinary clinic was charged with anticipation. Even Ethan seemed to sense the significance of the day, babbling Mira Pup repeatedly, his attempt at the puppy's name, and pointing excitedly whenever Athena's ears perked up at the mention. Dr. Abernathy greeted them personally in the clinic. Parking lot, Miracle cradled carefully in her arms. The puppy looked markedly improved even from the day before, his eyes brighter, his movements more coordinated, though still weak. "He's been asking for his mama all morning," the veterinarian said, nodding toward Athena, who sat with perfect composure in the back of the SUV, despite her evident eagerness. "Let's get him settled in the car before we go over his care instructions." The reunion between mother and puppy was a moment of such tender connection that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. Athena greeted her offspring with gentle nuzzles and soft sounds of reassurance, carefully inspecting him as if assessing his improved condition for herself. Miracle responded with weak but enthusiastic movements, pressing himself against his mother's warm fur. "Doggy hugs!" Ethan declared from his car seat, clapping his hands in delight. Dr. Abernathy spent 20 minutes reviewing Miracle's medication schedule, feeding requirements, and warning signs that would necessitate a return visit. James took detailed notes, his medical background evident in the precise questions he asked about dosages and potential complications. The biggest concern now is continuing to build his strength while fighting off any remaining infection, the veterinarian concluded. The fact that he's responding so well to treatment is incredibly encouraging, but he's still got a long road ahead. She handed Sarah a business card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. "Call me anytime, day or night, if you have concerns. This little guy's recovery is something of a personal mission for me now." She glanced at Athena with undisguised admiration. His mother refused to give up on him. The least we can do is show the same commitment. The drive home was quiet, everyone, human and canine, seeming to understand the need for calm as Miracle adjusted to his new situation. The puppy lay curled against Athena in the back of the SUV, occasionally lifting his head to look out the window before settling back against his mother's comforting presence. At home, they carefully transferred Miracle to his recovery area, making sure he had access to fresh water and the special bedding James had prepared. Athena immediately positioned herself beside the baby gate, dividing her attention between her puppy and Ethan, who watched the proceedings with fascination from his playpen nearby. "I've never seen anything like this," Sarah murmured as they observed Athena's caretaking behavior. The German shepherd was methodically grooming Miracle, her movements gentle yet thorough, paying special attention to the areas where IV catheters and monitoring equipment had been attached during his hospital stay. "It's like she's checking him for herself," James agreed, "making sure he's really okay." The rest of the day fell into a rhythm structured around Miracle's care needs. Every 2 hours, they administered his medication and offered small amounts of the special formula and bone broth Dr. Abernathy had recommended. Athena supervised each interaction, her intelligent eyes following their movements as if assessing their technique. By early evening, a new pattern had established itself. Miracle would sleep for short periods, wake for feeding and brief, gentle interaction, then return to sleep under Athena's watchful eye. Ethan, with surprising intuition for a child his age, seemed to understand the puppy's need for quiet, contentedly playing with his toys nearby without attempting to enter the recovery area. After dinner, as twilight softened the edges of the autumn day, Sarah stood at the kitchen window, watching James in the backyard with Ethan and Athena. The German shepherd was taking a brief break from her nursing duties, engaging in some gentle exercise while still maintaining awareness of the house where her puppy rested. Sarah observed with fascination as James demonstrated to Ethan how to throw a soft ball for Athena. The dog watched attentively. Then, when the toddler's throw fell short, barely leaving his hand before dropping to the grass, Athena pretended to chase it with exaggerated movements that made Ethan collapse in giggles. "She's playing with him," Sarah whispered in amazement. "She knows he's trying to throw the ball, and she's pretending he succeeded." The moment crystallized something Sarah had been feeling since Athena entered their lives, that they were experiencing something beyond ordinary human-animal companionship. This was communication across species boundaries, a shared understanding that transcended the limitations of language. Later that night, after Ethan was tucked into bed and Miracle had received his final medication of the day, Sarah and James sat on the living room floor near the recovery area, speaking softly as they watched both dogs. Miracle had fallen asleep, his small body rising and falling with healthier, more regular breaths than the day before. Athena lay beside him, alert despite the late hour. "I've been thinking," James said, his voice thoughtful. "Everything that happened, finding that kennel on our property, Ethan somehow opening the lock, Athena choosing to trust us instead of just taking her puppy and running, it all seems so orchestrated," Sarah suggested. "Not exactly, more like aligned." He searched for the right words. "As a doctor, I deal in probabilities. The probability of all these specific events happening in just this way, leading to just this outcome." He shook his head. "It's statistically improbable to the point of seeming impossible." Sarah considered this. "Maybe some connections aren't about probability. Maybe they're about possibility, about what can happen when openness and trust overcome fear and calculation." As if understanding their conversation, Athena raised her head, her amber eyes reflecting the soft lamplight as she gazed at them. Then, with deliberate movements, she rose and approached, settling herself between them on the floor, a bridge connecting their separate positions. James gently stroked her fur, his expression thoughtful. "The officer who called today said they've located all 7 of her puppies now. The other 6 are in various states of recovery, but they're all expected to survive." "Because of her," Sarah said softly, watching as Athena's eyes drifted closed under James's gentle touch, perhaps the first moment of true relaxation she had allowed herself in months. She never gave up on them. "That's what makes her story so powerful," James agreed. "It's not just about animal intelligence or maternal instinct, remarkable as those are. It's about choosing hope over despair, perseverance over surrender. He looked at Sarah, his eyes reflecting the depth of his feeling. That's something we all need to be reminded of sometimes. The next morning brought subtle but noticeable improvements in Miracle's condition. His eyes were brighter, his movements more coordinated, and he managed to eat a small amount of solid food alongside his special formula. Dr. Abernathy, who called to check on his progress, was encouraged by the report. "Keep doing exactly what you're doing," she advised. At this rate, he might be ready for his first short walk outside by the end of the week. The mention of going outside seemed to resonate with both dogs. Miracle's ears perked up, and Athena, who had been lying nearby during the call, rose to her feet with evident interest. "I think they understood that," Sarah laughed after ending the call. "We're going to have to be careful about spelling certain words around here." As the day progressed, they noticed another fascinating development. Athena had begun what appeared to be intentional training interactions with Miracle. She would demonstrate behaviors, sitting on command, staying in position, even the proper way to take food gently from a human hand, and then watch expectantly as the puppy attempted to mimic her actions. When he succeeded, even in small ways, she would gently nuzzle him in apparent approval. "She's teaching him," James observed with fascination, "not just basic dog behaviors, but specific skills for interacting with humans." She wants him to be safe, Sarah realized, to understand the rules that will keep him protected in a human world. The implications of this deliberate teaching behavior added yet another dimension to their understanding of Athena's intelligence. She wasn't simply caring for her puppy's physical needs. She was preparing him for the future, passing on knowledge gained through her own experiences. That afternoon, they received another call, this time from Detective Ramirez of the county sheriff's department. He wanted to stop by to take an official statement about finding the kennel and to update them on the investigation. When the detective arrived, a serious man in his 50s with kind eyes that softened when he saw Ethan, he first spent time examining the area where the kennel had been found, taking photographs and notes for the official record. "This is now part of a much larger case," he explained as they sat at the kitchen table afterward, Athena positioned protectively near both Ethan's play area and Miracle's recovery space. Sloan was operating fighting dog rings in 3 counties. The evidence we've gathered suggests he was specifically targeting puppies from working dog bloodlines for training as either fighters or bait dogs. Sarah felt ill at the thought. And Athena's puppies. Based on their age and condition, they were likely being prepared as bait dogs, Ramirez confirmed grimly. "It's a miracle." He paused, glancing at the recovering puppy, an appropriate name, by the way, that any of them survived. "Because of her," James said, nodding toward Athena, who was watching the detective with intelligent assessment. "She found them before it was too late." Ramirez nodded, his expression one of genuine amazement. "In 23 years of law enforcement, I've never encountered anything like this. The distances involved, the secured kennels, the fact that she systematically located and freed her puppies, one by one." He shook his head. "The K9 officers in our department have been talking about nothing else. They've asked if they can meet her sometime." "Of course," Sarah agreed, touched by the respect evident in the detective's voice. "She deserves all the recognition in the world for what she's done." As Ramirez prepared to leave, he paused at the door, looking back at the scene in the living room, Ethan playing quietly near Athena, who maintained her position between the toddler and her recovering puppy, a living embodiment of protection and care. "You know," the detective said thoughtfully, "in my line of work you see a lot of darkness, the worst of what people can do to each other and to innocent creatures." He gestured toward Athena. "But then you see something like this, a mother's determination, a child's innocent compassion, a family opening their hearts, and it restores your faith in what's possible. After he departed, Sarah stood at the window, watching his car disappear down their driveway, his words resonating in her mind. The detective had captured something essential about their experience. In the midst of a situation born from human cruelty, they had discovered profound beauty in the connections formed across the boundaries of species and circumstance. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long golden bars across the living room floor, Miracle attempted his first substantial independent movement since coming home. With evident effort, he pulled himself to his feet and took several wobbly steps toward where Ethan sat playing with blocks nearby. Athena watched attentively, but didn't interfere, seeming to understand the importance of this milestone. Sarah and James held their breath as the puppy navigated the short distance to the edge of his enclosure, where he stood looking at Ethan through the mesh of the baby gate. Ethan, sensing the significance of the moment, set down his blocks and moved to the gate, his small fingers reaching through the mesh. "Hi, Mira," he said softly, using his abbreviated version of the puppy's name. Miracle stretched his neck forward, gently licking the toddler's fingers in greeting. It was a moment of perfect connection. Child and puppy, both young lives full of potential, reaching toward each other across the temporary barrier. Athena moved to sit beside them, her posture conveying alert contentment as she observed this interaction between her two charges, her puppy and her adopted human child. The sight crystallized everything that had developed over these extraordinary days. Trust, built from the ruins of betrayal, connection forged across differences, and the remarkable capacity for healing that exists when compassion overcomes cruelty. In that quiet moment of connection, something profound was affirmed. The journey that had begun with desperation and danger, a mother searching for her stolen children, a locked kennel in an abandoned corner of a rural property, a toddler's innocent intervention, had transformed into something no one could have predicted. A family, unconventional but unquestionably real, bound together by experiences that defied explanation but demanded acknowledgement. And as the late afternoon light bathed them all in its warm glow, Sarah understood that they had been given more than just the gift of two remarkable dogs. They had been granted a living reminder of what becomes possible when we recognize the spark of understanding that exists between all living beings, the capacity for connection that transcends differences and creates bonds that even the darkest circumstances cannot sever. 3 weeks after Miracle's homecoming, the Mitchell household had settled into rhythms that would have seemed impossible to imagine before the dog's arrival. The calendar on the refrigerator now tracked not only James's hospital shifts and Ethan's playgroup schedule, but also veterinary appointments, training sessions, and the steadily increasing duration of Miracle's supervised outdoor activities. The transformation in the young German Shepherd was nothing short of remarkable. Under Athena's guidance and the family's dedicated care, Miracle had progressed from a skeletal, barely responsive puppy to an increasingly energetic young dog whose playful spirit emerged more each day. His coat had begun to regain its natural luster, and though still underweight, his frame was filling out with healthy muscle. Dr. Abernathy, during their weekly checkups, repeatedly expressed amazement at his rate of recovery. "His blood work is completely normal now," she announced during their most recent visit, reviewing the results with the professional satisfaction of a doctor whose patient has exceeded all expectations. "And his lung function has improved significantly. I'd say he's officially out of danger." The most fascinating aspect of Miracle's recovery, however, wasn't medical but behavioral. Under Athena's methodical tutelage, he was developing skills and manners that typically took months of professional training to instill. He had already mastered basic commands, displayed impeccable house manners, and most remarkably, seemed to understand the concept of gentle interaction with Ethan, never jumping or playing roughly despite his growing strength and natural puppy exuberance. "It's like watching a master teacher with her apprentice," James commented one evening, as they observed Athena demonstrating to Miracle how to retrieve specific toys by name, a skill most dogs took extensive repetition to learn, but which the puppy was grasping with astonishing speed. Athena herself had blossomed in ways that continued to amaze them. The vigilant wariness that had characterized her early days with them had softened into alert confidence. She still maintained her self-appointed guardianship of Ethan, but with less tension, as if she had assessed their home environment and deemed it secure enough to relax her constant surveillance. More striking was her growing bond with Sarah and James. What had begun as tolerance based on their care of her puppy and son had evolved into genuine affection. She would now seek them out for brief moments of connection, leaning against their legs while they prepared dinner, resting her head on their laps during quiet evening moments, or bringing toys to invite shared play in a manner that seemed almost deliberately reciprocal. One crisp November morning, as the first frost silvered the grass in their backyard, Sarah stood at the kitchen window, watching James supervise what had become a morning ritual, Ethan bundled against the autumn chill, giggling as he practiced simple training cues with both dogs. Miracle responded with puppy enthusiasm, while Athena demonstrated each command with perfect precision before watching her offspring attempt to follow suit. The scene embodied everything that had transformed in their lives over these weeks: the joy, the unexpected connection, the sense of purpose that had emerged from what began as a rescue but had become something far more profound. The doorbell's chime interrupted her reflections. Sarah opened the front door to find Detective Ramirez standing on the porch, accompanied by a tall woman in a K-9 unit uniform. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," the detective greeted her. "I hope we're not interrupting. This is Sergeant Keller from the County K-9 Training Division. She's been following Athena's story and asked if she might meet her." Sarah welcomed them inside, explaining that the dogs and the rest of the family were currently in the backyard. As she led them through the house, Sergeant Keller asked thoughtful questions about Athena's behavior, listening to Sarah's responses with evident professional interest. In the backyard, Athena immediately noticed the visitors. Her posture shifted subtly, not alarmed but more alert, positioning herself automatically between the newcomers and Ethan in a movement so smooth it might have gone unnoticed by someone less familiar with her protective patterns. "That's remarkable," Sergeant Keller murmured, observing the dog's behavior with an expert's appreciation. "No aggressive display, but clear positional awareness and protective intent. And she did that without any formal training?" "As far as we know," Sarah confirmed. "Everything she does seems to come from her own intelligence and instinct rather than human direction." James approached with Ethan, while Miracle remained in his designated stay position several yards away, a recent skill he was still mastering. After introductions, Sergeant Keller knelt to allow Athena to approach and assess her on the dog's terms, a gesture of respect that demonstrated her understanding of canine psychology. Athena conducted her evaluation with characteristic thoroughness, sniffing the sergeant's extended hand and studying her face before apparently deciding she posed no threat. She then returned to Ethan's side, maintaining her protective proximity while relaxing her alert posture. "I've been training working dogs for 15 years, Sergeant Keller said, straightening up with undisguised admiration in her voice. "German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, the breeds we typically use for police and search and rescue work. I've never seen natural abilities like hers in an untrained dog." She watched as Miracle, released from his stay by James's command, trotted over to join them, his movement still showing a slight hitch, a lingering reminder of his ordeal. but his eyes bright with healthy curiosity. "The reason for our visit isn't just professional curiosity," Detective Ramirez explained. "The county prosecutor is preparing the case against Sloan, and there's been significant media interest in Athena's story. Several news outlets have requested interviews." Sarah and James exchanged concerned glances. While they understood the public interest in such an extraordinary tale, they were protective of their privacy, particularly where Ethan was concerned. Sergeant Keller seemed to read their hesitation. "We completely understand if you're not comfortable with media attention," she assured them. "But there's another aspect to consider. Stories like Athena's can have a profound impact on public awareness of animal cruelty issues and the remarkable capabilities of dogs. It could potentially help advocate for stronger protection laws and resources for animal rescue operations." She gestured toward Athena, who was now allowing Ethan to lean against her while he chatted animatedly to Miracle. What she accomplished, tracking her puppies across miles, freeing them from secured locations, protecting them at great personal risk, it challenges our understanding of animal cognition and emotional capacity. That kind of story changes perspectives. Sarah considered this thoughtfully. What exactly would be involved? "We were thinking of something carefully controlled," Detective Ramirez suggested. "Perhaps a single interview with a respected journalist conducted here where Athena and Miracle feel comfortable, with full control over what questions are asked and how the story is presented." After the officers departed, promising to provide more specific details about the proposed interview for them to consider, Sarah and James discussed the possibility while preparing lunch. Athena lay nearby, seemingly resting but with one eye open, monitoring Ethan and Miracle as they played with building blocks on the living room floor. "I understand the value of sharing their story," James said, slicing apples for Ethan's plate. "But I'm concerned about turning them into spectacles or sensation, especially after everything they've been through." Sarah nodded in agreement. "On the other hand, if it helps prevent other animals from suffering similar fates or helps people understand the depth of animal intelligence and emotion." She glanced at Athena. "She deserves recognition for what she did. It was extraordinary by any standard." They were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell again. James raised an eyebrow. "Popular morning," he commented, moving to answer it. He returned moments later with an unexpected visitor, Dr. Eleanor Jensen, the director of the university's Canine Cognition Research Center, whom they had met briefly at a hospital fundraiser the previous year. She apologized for the unannounced visit, explaining that Detective Ramirez had contacted her about Athena, and her professional curiosity couldn't wait for formal arrangements. "I've spent my career studying canine intelligence and problem-solving abilities," Dr. Jensen explained as they sat in the living room, watching Athena supervise the interaction between Miracle and Ethan. What Detective Ramirez described goes beyond anything in the current scientific literature. She outlined a proposal that took them by surprise, an opportunity for Athena and Miracle to participate in a research study on canine cognition, problem-solving, and cross-species bonding. The study would be conducted primarily in their home, minimizing stress on the dogs, with specific cognitive tasks designed to document and better understand Athena's exceptional abilities. "We're particularly interested in her teaching behaviors." "With her puppy?" Dr. Jensen continued, her enthusiasm evident in her animated gestures. "Deliberate demonstration and correction is something we rarely observe so explicitly in canines. It suggests a level of metacognition and awareness of knowledge transfer that challenges current understanding of animal cognition." As if aware she was being discussed, Athena rose from her position and approached their visitor, studying her with that penetrating intelligence that still sometimes took Sarah's breath away. Dr. Jensen, to her credit, remained perfectly still, allowing the assessment. "Hello, remarkable one," the researcher said softly, making no attempt to touch or impose herself. "You've upended a lot of scientific assumptions, you know." Athena tilted her head slightly, maintaining eye contact in a way that seemed almost conversational. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned and retrieved one of Miracle's training toys, a puzzle ball designed to dispense treats when manipulated correctly. She placed it deliberately at Dr. Jensen's feet, then looked up expectantly. "Oh my," Dr. Jensen whispered, clearly understanding the significance of the gesture. "She's inviting me to observe her problem-solving abilities." She looked at Sarah and James with barely contained academic excitement. "May I?" At their nod, she activated the puzzle toy, placing a small treat inside before setting it on the floor. Athena solved it with efficient movements, then immediately guided Miracle through the process with gentle nudges and demonstrative paw movements. When he successfully retrieved the treat, she looked back at Dr. Jensen with what seemed unmistakably like pride. "Extraordinary," the researcher breathed. "She's not just solving the puzzle, she's deliberately showing us that she can teach the skill." She looked up at Sarah and James, her professional composure momentarily overtaken by genuine wonder. "I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that what we're observing here could change our understanding of animal cognition." Later that evening, after their visitors had departed and Ethan was tucked into bed, Sarah and James sat on the back porch, the first stars appearing in the clear November sky. Through the glass doors, they could see Athena and Miracle curled. Together on their bed near the fireplace, the puppy nestled against his mother in peaceful sleep. "It's been quite a day," James remarked, his arm around Sarah's shoulders against the evening chill. "Detective Ramirez, Sergeant Keller, Dr. Jensen. Athena's becoming quite the celebrity." Sarah leaned into his embrace, contemplating the unexpected turns their life had taken since that fateful morning when Ethan had somehow opened a locked kennel. "What do you think about Dr. Jensen's research proposal and the interview idea?" James considered this thoughtfully. "I think if they're conducted with proper respect for what these dogs have been through, and if they might help others understand the depth of animal intelligence and emotion, it could be a positive thing." He gestured toward the sleeping dogs. What Athena did, tracking her puppies, freeing them one by one, protecting them at all costs. It's a story of such extraordinary courage and determination. And now, seeing how she cares for both Miracle and Ethan, how she's rebuilding her capacity for trust, despite everything humans did to her. There's something profound there that deserves recognition. "A testament to resilience," Sarah agreed, softly, "to the capacity to overcome trauma without losing the ability to connect, to trust, to love." They fell silent, contemplating the deeper implications of what had entered their lives. What had begun as a rescue had transformed into something far more significant, a window into aspects of animal consciousness that challenged conventional understanding, and a daily lesson in courage, adaptation, and the healing power of unconditional acceptance. The following morning brought a new development. As Sarah prepared breakfast, her phone chimed with a message from Dr. Abernathy. The veterinarian had been in contact with specialists tracking the recovery of Athena's other puppies and had news to share. All 6 were responding well to treatment, but finding appropriate adoptive homes for them presented challenges due to their traumatic beginnings and potential special needs. The ideal scenario would be homes with experience handling intelligent working breeds, Dr. Abernathy had written, and ideally some ongoing connection with Athena, given the strong maternal bond she's demonstrated. Sarah showed the message to James, who read it thoughtfully. "She's suggesting keeping the family connected somehow," he said, understanding the implication. They both looked at Athena, who was supervising Ethan's breakfast with her customary attentiveness, while Miracle practiced a patient down stay nearby, a skill he had mastered with remarkable speed under his mother's tutelage. "It would be a significant commitment," Sarah said carefully. "We weren't planning on one dog, let alone coordinating relationships with 7 of them." James nodded, his expression thoughtful, as he watched Athena gently redirect Miracle when the puppy showed signs of breaking his stay position. But then again, none of this was planned. And look how it's enriched our lives. Before they could discuss it further, the doorbell rang, an early morning delivery. James returned from the front door carrying a package addressed to the Mitchell family and Athena. Inside was a letter from the County Animal Control Department, along with an official-looking certificate and a specialized service dog vest sized for a German Shepherd. The letter explained that in recognition of Athena's extraordinary actions, and following evaluation by Sergeant Keller, she was being granted special certification as a therapy and emotional support animal, a designation that would afford her legal protections and access privileges not typically extended to family pets. "In 20 years of animal welfare work," the letter concluded, "we have never encountered a case that so clearly demonstrates the depth of animal intelligence, emotional capacity, and the profound bonds that can form between species." Athena's story reminds us that courage, determination, and love are not exclusively human traits, but universal qualities that transcend the boundaries we too often construct between ourselves and the other beings with whom we share this world. As Sarah read these words aloud, Athena approached, her intelligent eyes fixed on the certificate as if understanding its significance. She then did something she had never done before. She placed one paw on Sarah's knee and the other on James's, creating a physical connection between them. The gesture seemed to embody everything that had unfolded since that October morning, a bridge between species built on trust, respect, and mutual protection. A reminder that sometimes the most profound connections emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, and a testament to the extraordinary capacity for healing that exists when compassion overcomes cruelty and understanding replaces fear. In that moment of connection, as autumn light filled their kitchen and the sounds of Ethan's happy chatter mingled with Miracle's playful movements, the Mitchells understood that their lives had been forever altered, not just by the presence of 2 remarkable dogs, but by the perspective they had brought. A window into a world where intelligence, emotion, and profound courage existed beyond human domains, waiting only for the openness to recognize and honor it. And in that recognition lay the seed of something transformative, not just for their family, but for all who would come to know Athena's story and be changed by what it revealed about the depth of connection possible between all living beings. As December arrived, bringing the first dusting of snow to their rural property, the Mitchell family found themselves at the center of an unexpected evolution. What had begun as a private moment of connection between a toddler and an abandoned puppy had steadily expanded into something with far-reaching implications. The cognitive research project led by Dr. Jensen had commenced with remarkable results. Rather than requiring the dogs to visit a laboratory setting, the researcher had transformed a corner of the Mitchell's sunroom into a testing area equipped with cameras and specialized equipment designed to document Athena and Miracle's behaviors. 3 times weekly, Dr. Jensen and her graduate assistant would arrive with new challenges and puzzles, each designed to assess different aspects of canine problem-solving, communication, and teaching behavior. What we're observing defies conventional understanding of canine cognition, Dr. Jensen explained one afternoon, as they reviewed footage of Athena demonstrating to Miracle how to navigate a complex sequence of actions to retrieve a reward. Most dogs learn through repetition and conditioning, Athena not only solves problems, but appears to analyze the underlying principles and then deliberately demonstrate them for her puppy. The most compelling evidence came during a particular test involving a transparent puzzle box with multiple locking mechanisms. After solving it once herself, Athena had systematically demonstrated each step to Miracle, using her paw to tap the sequences in which the locks should be addressed. When the puppy made a mistake, she would gently redirect him, sometimes placing her own paw over his to guide the correct movement. That's not simple imitation or reinforcement learning, Dr. Jensen had pointed out, her voice hushed with academic excitement. That's abstract causal understanding combined with intentional teaching, breaking down a complex task into learnable components and scaffolding the instruction. We see this in primate studies and in human education, but rarely with such clarity in canines. The implications extended beyond academic interest. Dr. Jensen's preliminary findings, though not yet published in peer-reviewed journals, had begun circulating within the scientific community, drawing attention from researchers in animal cognition, evolutionary biology, and even comparative neuroscience. We're reconsidering fundamental assumptions about the cognitive gap between humans and other species, she told them. Not suggesting there isn't a gap, but questioning its width and character. Athena's abilities suggest certain forms of intelligence may be more widely distributed across species than we've recognized, perhaps manifesting differently but no less significantly. Meanwhile, the carefully managed media coverage that Detective Ramirez had suggested had expanded beyond their expectations. After a thoughtfully conducted initial interview with a respected science journalist, the story had been picked up by national outlets, with headlines highlighting not just the dramatic rescue elements, but the deeper implications about animal intelligence and emotional capacity. Sarah had initially worried about invasion of their privacy, but the public response proved surprisingly respectful and supportive. Rather than sensation-seeking intrusion, they received letters, emails, and social media messages expressing gratitude for sharing Athena's story, often accompanied by similar tales of extraordinary animal intelligence and devotion. Many came from families with service or working dogs, but others described unexpected moments of profound connection with animals ranging from household pets to wildlife. Your German Shepherd is changing how people see animals, one particularly touching letter read. My daughter has autism and struggles to connect with people, but she bonded immediately with our rescue dog. I never fully understood what was happening between them until I read about Athena. Now I realize they've developed their own language, their own way of understanding each other that doesn't need words. Thank you for helping me see this connection for what it truly is, not just companionship, but communication across different ways of perceiving the world. The most meaningful development, however, centered around Athena's other puppies. Following Dr. Abernathy's suggestion about the importance of maintaining family connections, the Mitchells had reached out to the various shelters and foster homes caring for the remaining 6 German Shepherd puppies. Working with Detective Ramirez and Sergeant Keller, they had helped coordinate a unique adoption approach, identifying families within reasonable distance who had appropriate experience with working dogs and who understood the special nature of these puppies' background and needs. 4 of the puppies had already been placed in carefully selected homes, including one with a paramedic family 2 neighborhoods over, another with a retired canine officer who lived just outside the city limits, a third with a family whose teenage daughter was training for search and rescue work, and the 4th with a child psychologist who specialized in animal-assisted therapy. The remaining 2 were still in specialized foster care, recovering from more severe health issues, but had promising adoption prospects with families who had been thoroughly vetted and prepared. What made this network truly special was the commitment to maintaining connections between the siblings and their mother. Monthly family reunions had been established, rotating between the adoptive homes, where Athena could interact with her offspring and the puppies could maintain bonds with each other. The first of these gatherings had taken place the previous weekend at the Mitchell home, and the results had astonished everyone. Athena had greeted each returning puppy with evident recognition and what could only be described as joy, inspecting them thoroughly as if assessing their health and care. More remarkably, she had immediately begun reinforcing training behaviors with each one, as if continuing education that had been interrupted. "It's like she's checking their progress," Sergeant Keller had commented, observing the interactions with professional fascination, making sure they remember what she taught them and seeing what they've learned in their new homes. The puppies, despite their separation, had fallen into coordinated play and communication patterns that suggested persistent family bonds. Even more touching was their collective interaction with Ethan. Each puppy, influenced by Miracle's example and perhaps by some instruction from Athena, approached the toddler with gentle care, seeming to understand his small size required special consideration. "They recognize him as part of their extended family unit," Dr. Jensen had explained, documenting the interactions for her research, possibly because they sense Athena's protective connection to him. It's a remarkable example of cross-species social bonding. This morning, as Sarah prepared for the day ahead, a special delivery arrived, advance copies of a children's book titled Athena's Journey, created by an award-winning author-illustrator who had approached them after reading about their story. With the Mitchells' input and approval, she had crafted a beautifully illustrated narrative that captured Athena's extraordinary journey in terms accessible to young readers, focusing on themes of courage, family love, and the capacity for trust. "To overcome fear. I hope you feel I've done justice to her story," the accompanying note read. 10% of all proceeds will be donated to the newly established Athena Fund for Animal Welfare and Research, which will support both animal rescue operations and scientific studies of animal cognition. Sarah turned the pages slowly, admiring the vibrant illustrations that depicted Athena's search for her puppies, Ethan's discovery of Miracle, and the formation of their unconventional family. The artist had captured Athena's intelligence and dignity perfectly, along with Ethan's innocent compassion and Miracle's journey from fragility to strength. "What do you think?" she asked, kneeling to show the book to Athena, who examined the pages with evident interest, her intelligent eyes focusing on each illustration as if recognizing the events portrayed. The doorbell interrupted this moment of reflection. James, who had the day off from the hospital, answered it to find a young couple standing on the porch, looking nervous but determined. They introduced themselves as the Brennans, explaining that they had recently moved to the area and had been following Athena's story with particular interest. "Our daughter Emma has selective mutism," Mrs. Brennan explained as they sat in the living room, watching Athena and Miracle interact with their 4-year-old, who had not spoken a word since their arrival, but was communicating with the dogs through gentle touches and expressive eyes. "She hasn't spoken outside our home in almost 2 years, despite extensive therapy. When we read about Athena's ability to communicate beyond conventional boundaries, to forge connections where language fails, we wondered if meeting her might help." The Mitchells exchanged glances, touched by the trust implicit in this request. They had received similar inquiries before, but had been cautious about exposing Athena and Miracle to too many strangers, concerned about their well-being after everything they had endured. But something about this particular situation resonated. Perhaps it was the way Emma was interacting with the dogs. Not demanding or intrusive, but receptive and gentle. Or perhaps it was Athena's response. The German shepherd had positioned herself beside the silent child with the same attentive presence she typically reserved for Ethan, seeming to understand intuitively that here was another young one requiring special consideration. "We can't promise anything," Sarah said gently to the hopeful parents. "Athena chooses her own connections, but we'd be open to arranging regular visits to see if a relationship develops that might help Emma." As they discussed possibilities, Miracle approached Emma with a soft toy, dropping it at her feet in clear invitation. The little girl hesitated, then picked it up and tossed it a short distance. Miracle retrieved it joyfully, returning it to her with a gentle delivery that spoke of Athena's careful teaching. A small smile appeared on Emma's face, the first her parents had seen in a public setting in months. She looked up at Athena, who was watching the interaction with what seemed like approval, then back to Miracle, who waited patiently for her to throw the toy again. "Pa! Ball!" Emma whispered, so softly that only those closest to her could hear. "Good dog." Mrs. Brennan's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Her husband reached over to squeeze her shoulder, his own expression a mixture of shock and hope. "She spoke," he said quietly to the Mitchells. "That's the first word she said outside our home in 22 months. James nodded, understanding the significance of the moment. "Sometimes traditional therapies and approaches hit walls," he said, drawing on his medical background. "But connections can form in unexpected ways, bridges where conventional paths don't exist." As the visit continued, Emma remained largely silent, but visibly more relaxed, occasionally whispering single words to the dogs when she thought no one was listening. Athena maintained her gentle presence nearby, while Miracle engaged in carefully modulated play that seemed to respect the child's boundaries while gradually encouraging more interaction. Before the Brennans departed, arrangements had been made for regular visits, with Dr. Jensen's research team interested in documenting how this relationship might develop and potentially benefit Emma's condition. The cognitive scientist had a growing interest in how Athena and Miracle might serve as bridges for children with communication challenges, their non-verbal intelligence creating pathways where human interventions sometimes faltered. That evening, after Ethan was tucked into bed with Athena, as always stationed protectively nearby, Sarah and James sat in the living room reflecting on the day's events. Miracle lay stretched across their feet, his body now strong and healthy, his coat regaining the lustrous quality characteristic of his breeding. "When I think about how close we came to missing all of this," Sarah said softly, gesturing to encompass not just the dogs, but everything their presence had brought into their lives. If Ethan hadn't wandered into the yard that morning, if the lock hadn't given way. James nodded, understanding the cascade of seemingly random events that had led to their current reality. Conventional thinking would call it coincidence, a series of improbable but explainable occurrences that happen to align. But I find myself wondering if there isn't something more at work. "Like what?" Sarah asked, curious about his perspective. "I'm not sure I have the right words for it," he admitted. "But working in emergency medicine, I've sometimes witnessed moments where the boundaries between what we understand and what we don't become permeable, where connections form that can't be fully explained by our current frameworks." He looked toward the stairs, where Athena maintained her vigil near Ethan's room. "Perhaps intelligence, consciousness, the capacity for connection, perhaps these exist on a spectrum far broader than we've recognized, manifesting in ways unique to each species, but no less profound." Sarah considered this thoughtfully. 6 months ago, she might have dismissed such reflections as uncharacteristically philosophical for her science-minded husband. But their experiences with Athena and Miracle had opened spaces for wonder that, transcended conventional explanations. The following morning brought news that expanded these reflections further. Dr. Jensen arrived earlier than usual, especially containing her academic excitement as she shared the latest development in her research. We've been analyzing the video data from the problem-solving sessions, particularly focusing on Athena's teaching. Behaviors with Miracle, she explained, setting up her laptop to show them the footage. What we observed led us to set up a specialized test yesterday with the graduate team, a novel problem that neither Athena nor Miracle had encountered before, but which required similar logical principles to tasks they had mastered. The video showed Miracle approaching the new puzzle, a complex arrangement requiring multiple steps in a specific sequence to release a reward. Without hesitation, he applied principles he had learned from previous challenges, solving it on his first attempt. That alone is remarkable, Dr. Jensen pointed out. Transfer of abstract principles to novel situations suggests conceptual understanding, not just memorized responses. But what happened next is truly extraordinary. The footage continued, showing Athena observing her puppy's success, then deliberately altering the puzzle to create a more challenging configuration. She watched as Miracle attempted the modified version, offering guidance only when he hesitated, allowing him to work through the problem while providing just enough support to prevent frustration. This goes beyond teaching specific skills, Dr. Jensen explained, her voice hushed with wonder. She's teaching him how to learn, creating graduated challenges, providing scaffolded support, adjusting the difficulty based on his responses. These are pedagogical principles we associate with human education, not instinctive animal behavior. She looked up at them, her academic reserve momentarily overcome by genuine awe. I believe what we're observing is not just intelligence, but wisdom, the application of knowledge tempered by experience and judgment, adapted to the needs of the learner. In human terms, we might call Athena not just a mother or a teacher, but a mentor. As Dr. Jensen continued explaining the implications of these observations for their understanding of animal cognition, Sarah watched Athena, who had settled, near the sunroom door, attentively observing their conversation as if following its content. Their eyes met, and in that moment of connection, Sarah felt once again the sense of recognition across species boundaries, an acknowledgement between two mothers, two protectors, two beings capable of perceiving the world in profoundly different yet intersecting ways. Later that day, as snow began falling more heavily outside, Sarah received an email from Detective Ramirez with news that brought their journey full circle. Victor Sloan, the man responsible for abducting and endangering Athena's puppies, had been sentenced to 5 years in prison on multiple counts of animal cruelty, illegal dogfighting operations, and related charges. More significantly, the judge had cited Athena's extraordinary efforts to save her offspring as evidence of the depth of consciousness and emotional capacity in animals, using this to justify the maximum sentence allowed under current law. This case has already influenced pending legislation on animal welfare and protection, the detective wrote. Athena's story is literally changing how our legal system views and values animal life and consciousness. As Sarah shared this news with James that evening, they stood together at the living room window, watching the snow transform their property into a pristine landscape of white. Athena and Miracle played in the yard, their dark figures striking against the snow, moving with the joyful coordination of beings perfectly attuned to each other's movements and intentions. Look at them, Sarah said softly. After everything they've been through, they still find such joy in the simplest experiences. James nodded, his arm around her shoulders. That might be the most profound lesson they've taught us. Resilience isn't just about surviving hardship, but about retaining the capacity for joy, for connection, for trust, about moving forward without being defined by what you've endured. As they watched, Ethan's voice called from the top of the stairs, awake from his nap. Almost instantly, Athena raised her head, alert to his voice, despite the distance and the closed doors between them. With a quick communication to Miracle that required no sound, just a subtle body movement that the younger dog immediately understood, she trotted toward the house, arriving at the door just as Sarah opened it. She shook the snow from her coat with dignified efficiency, then proceeded immediately to the stairs, where Ethan waited, his face lighting with delight at the sight of his faithful guardian. Miracle followed, still playing with boundless energy but restraining himself appropriately as he approached the toddler. "Tina! Mira!" Ethan called happily, reaching for them both. The scene crystallized everything that had unfolded since that October morning. The extraordinary journey from rescue to relationship, from trauma to trust, from separation to belonging. In the connections formed between species, in the bridges built across different ways of experiencing the world, lay possibilities for understanding that transcended conventional boundaries and opened new horizons of perception and appreciation. And in these expanded horizons stretched the promise of something profound, a recognition that intelligence, consciousness, and the capacity for connection existed not as exclusive human domains, but as varied expressions across the spectrum of life, waiting only for the openness to perceive and honor them. This recognition, sparked by a child's innocent intervention and a mother's extraordinary courage, continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond their immediate circle, changing perspectives, challenging assumptions, and illuminating the remarkable possibilities that emerge when we open ourselves to connections that transcend the boundaries we too often accept as fixed and impermeable. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.